bee people, welcome back to the B&K's Bees channel for the second installment of our Getting Started in Beekeeping series. This video is about the equipment needed to get started. I know there's a lot of different choices out there and there's a lot of different opinions on the equipment, so hopefully I'll be able to trim through some of the fat and help make that decision-making process a little bit smoother for you. This video will be divided into two sections. The first section will be for the beekeeper. The amount of that stuff will change based on how many prospective beekeepers you have in your house or how many people you think might be helping you out in the bee yard. And then the second section will be for the bees, and the amounts of that will change based on how many hives you have. That being said, I always recommend for beginners to get more than one hive when starting out. That'll allow you to compare directly between hives and then also have a fail-safe if something happens to the one. Another addition to that is I always recommend, if you have the financial capability, of getting an extra hive's worth of equipment. That is because when swarm season hits, you'll want to be able to make a split, and if you miss one to where they actually swarm, if you find them hanging off of a tree limb somewhere, you will want to have a hive ready for them to go into. First and most obvious requirement for the beekeeper is protective equipment. You see me in videos sometimes wearing a veil and sometimes not. That's a comfort level thing. When I first started off, my first few years, I had a full suit, and then I kind of switched to the veil and gloves, and then it was less and less and less. The bottom line for you is wear as much protective equipment as it takes to get you comfortable when you're walking out to your bees. You do not want to have that tentative fear prevent you from doing what needs to be done, because that can lead to more problems, and that fear can just really compound a problem for you. So make sure that you're comfortable walking out to your bees. If that takes a full astronaut suit and super thick gloves, then do that. And then if at some point in the future you realize that your fear was a little bit too much, or your fear was unwarranted, then hopefully you'll be able to at least deal with some smaller gloves for added dexterity, or maybe do away with the gloves altogether. But definitely get as much stuff as it takes to get you comfortable. So how much protective equipment should it take to get you comfortable? Well, nothing is completely sting proof. If you have a piece of fabric laying smoothly across your skin, definitely a bee stinger can get through. It won't be as severe as if it's directly on your skin, but you should be aware of the fact that some stings can get through. Now that being said, a shirt underneath a bee jacket, especially a vented jacket, you're pretty likely to go at least a full season without getting stung. So my recommendation to you as far as the protective equipment goes is a vented jacket and gloves. As far as the legs go, you can wear jeans, you can pull up your socks around the cuffs of your jeans, and that should be good enough as far as that goes. The second piece of required equipment for the beekeeper is the hive tool. There's really nothing special about these. It's just a flat piece of metal that you can use to pry things apart. I mean, bees are really good at gluing stuff together, and you'll want to have a tool that you can use some leverage on to help you out with that. This I don't have a clear-cut recommendation for. You can just go onto your beekeeping supply website or go down to your beekeeping supply store and pick something out. Also, one of my favorite hive tools of all time is just a paint scraper that I got at the local hardware store. So anything you can get to separate those frames and to help pull off inner covers, that'll help you out. This is a standard simple hive tool. I think it's 9 inches in length, and it probably cost me $4 or $5. So this is not a large expense tool. The last piece of absolutely necessary equipment for the beekeeper, and of course you can find a lot of other things that are not maybe so necessary. The last necessary piece of equipment for the beekeeper is a smoker. I found out recently that there were some local beekeepers who considered this a luxury and or unnecessary. That's not true at all. Sometimes you just need them to stop paying so much attention to you. Sometimes you need them to get off of a frame or off of a cover. Sometimes you need them to go from one place to another. Either way, the only really truly reliable method of doing any of those things is through smoke. Okay, the equipment you need for the bees. The first part we're going to talk about are the boxes. They come in a lot of different sizes, different depths, different widths, but hopefully you followed my advice from the first video and you purchased nukes. If you purchase nukes for your bees, then you are going to need to get deep equipment. The vast majority of nukes that are sold in the United States are sold as 5-frame deep nukes, so therefore you're going to have a deep box to put those frames into. So for the brood nest, standard brood nest size is 2 10-frame deeps. That's pretty good. That's what we run for honey colonies, and that's what I suggest you do. Now, as far as the honey reserves go, this is where the different sized boxes usually comes in. People will have the 2 standard 10-frame deeps for the brood nest and then stack shallow or medium supers on top because of the weight of a full honey box. Now, I usually don't let the weight of a box be a prohibiting factor for me, because if the box is just too heavy, you can harvest honey frame by frame. So, for that reason, I suggest for the honey reserves you just get more deep boxes. That way, every frame fits in every box. You only have one size of anything to order ever. And when the honey is harvested, after you pulled the honey out, you can utilize those frames in other hives or utilize it the next year so that the newer colonies don't have quite as much work to do to get started up. So I think that simplicity is really key. It is for me anyway, because I just have one repeat order of boxes and frames. I never have to mess around to see how many medium frames I need or how many shallow frames I need. I'm just always buying deep stuff. So, 2 standard 10-frame deeps for the brood nest, and probably 2 more for the honey. That might be a little bit optimistic, but you always want to err on the side of more. You do not want to have them fill it up quicker than you anticipated, and then you not have extra boxes to put on top. That can lead you to a swarming situation, and you can lose a lot of bees that way. Okay, so you have the 4 10-frame boxes. Now how about the frames and foundation that go in them? This is another area where I think that there's a simplicity factor that makes the decision for me, and that is plastic foundation. The plastic foundation is extremely durable. I mean, you can use it year in and year out. If the comb gets old, you can wipe it off and wash it off and repaint new fresh wax on there. They'll draw it out like that. A lot of people have had bad experiences with plastic foundation in the past, but usually I think that that's because they came thinly coated with beeswax. So just paint some more beeswax on there and they'll draw it out as quick as they will any other type of foundation. It's just too simple to ignore. It's durable as heck. It's never going to bust out of the frame in the extractor. So this is just great stuff. Now that would lead you to the question, why not all plastic frames? I don't like the all plastic frames because they bend during inspection rather than just pulling apart from the adjacent frames. Also, they have little crevices in the corners here that can allow a safe place for small hive beetles to escape the bees that would remove them. So I just don't mess with the all plastic frames, but I do like the plastic foundation. So I get grooved top bar and bottom bar wooden frames and the correctly sized foundation to go in them. Okay, inner and outer covers. I don't have an extra inner cover available. They're all in use on hives. So I will put up a picture of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about them. But yeah, this is a standard telescoping cover. I like these a lot. They're great for overwintering. They're great if you can get them heavy. Then you have less of likelihood of the lids being blown off or the hive getting knocked over. So yeah, I think this, especially if you're in northern climate, these telescoping covers are the way to go. The inner cover that I recommend you get should have some type of hole in the center for feeding, and either have an upper entrance cut from it, or you could purchase an upper entrance shim. I do recommend the upper entrance shim because, as I've said in videos in the past, it allows for a space for you to put dry sugar during the winter. So following my recommendations for the covers, it would be a standard telescoping cover with a metal lid, a standard inner cover with a feeder hole in the center, and then under the inner cover would be an upper entrance shim. Okay, so bottom boards. This is another thing where there are people who feel very, very strongly about one or the other. But the standard choices that you have are a screened board or a solid board. I have seen colonies overwinter well during cold winters above a screen, and I've also seen colonies pack on a lot of honey and produce very, very well during a warm summer above closed boards. So yeah, I don't really place a whole lot of emphasis on one set of pros and cons over the other. I think bees just kind of tend to adapt to the cavity they're in, and for that reason I let price be the deciding factor, and that's why we run mostly closed boards. If you're getting your equipment from a beekeeping supply store, you will see that they are sometimes offered with entrance reducers. You will want to purchase an entrance reducer. It's very, very useful, if not necessary, in the spring when these colonies are building up and don't quite have the numbers to defend the full width of the entrance. And then also during fall when robbing is rampant and you need to reduce the entrance size for them to more effectively defend the hive. At those times you'll need an entrance reducer. Last piece of necessary equipment for your bees is a feeder. This is yet another area where there are some hotly contested opinions. I mean, there's hotly contested arguments about whether you should feed your bees or not. I think that's a silly argument. We put bees into unnatural situations by installing them in the spring and or trying to get them to continue to build up through dearths. So if you want your bees to stay alive and have the best opportunity that they can to survive, you will be feeding your bees from time to time. Now, the obvious and cheapest and most widely used feeder are the Boardman entrance feeders. Those fit right in the entrance of the hive, and those are great for spring. But if you're going to try to purchase or set up one way of feeding that will work all year round, I think that the food has to be placed inside the hive. The open syrup out in the front of a hive can make robbing happen a lot quicker. It can really direct the robbing attention to the hives that you're feeding, and that can really be an issue. So, if we're going to only look at the feeder types that sit inside the hive, we're left with a few different options. The hive top feeders are great, but they're super expensive. So I just don't even mess with it. If it's more expensive than other viable options, then it's out for me. The frame replacement feeders are great. They're cheaper, but when you're feeding in the fall, trying to prepare your bees for winter, you want them to have all the frames in all of the boxes so that they can fill that stuff with syrup. So it doesn't work for fall, so it's out for me. The feeder that I use, that you've seen me use, and that I will put up a picture of here, is what I call the Hillabilly Hive Top Feeder. That is basically an aluminum baking pan from the dollar store up above the inner cover, sitting on sticks so that the bees have a way to get up and around it, and then you just close it up with another deep box. That way you don't have to get into the hive down by the frames to refill it. That way there's less of an opportunity for robbing. It holds a half of a gallon or more. Yeah, that's the method that I recommend. Hopefully you're following along with all my other tips, so you'll already have extra boxes available, and the only thing you'll need are some sticks from a nearby tree and a trip to the dollar store for those aluminum baking pans. Okay, so that wraps it up for the absolutely necessary equipment. There are a lot of other things that you can go out there and purchase, and that's up to you. Some of them have a lot of really good aspects to them, and some of them are just plain frivolous. But if you're just going on the necessities and price is a big factor for you as it is for me, then that's the necessary stuff. I wrote an article on beekbees.com to go along with this video. it goes into each section into a little bit more depth, and it ends each section with an absolute recommendation. So if you want to use that when you're going to your beekeeping supply store, or use it to clarify some of the things that I said here, it's available to you on beekeeping.com. The link is in the description. If this video earned it, I'd appreciate it if you click subscribe. That will allow you to get notifications for other videos in the future. If you liked it, click like. That'll help YouTube decide to spread it out to more would-be beekeepers. But yes, start planning for your bees. It's fall is moving quickly, and before we know it, spring will be here. And that time, I hope that you get out there and you have some fun with your bees. Thank you very much for watching.